LEE greater than Electronic Code of Federal Regulations (CFR) greater than Title 17. Commodity and Securities Exchanges greater than Chapter 2. Securities and Exchange Commission greater than Part 275. Rules and Regulations, Investment Advisors Act of 1940 greater than Section 275.2042 Books and records to be maintained by investment advisors. 17 CFR Section 275.204-2 Books and records to be maintained by investment advisors. Section 275.2042 Books and records to be maintained by investment advisors. Every investment advisor registered or required to be registered under Section 203 of the Act, 15 U.S.C. 80b3, shall make and keep true, accurate and current the following books and records relating to its investment advisory business. 1. A journal or journals, including cash receipts and disbursements, records, and any other records of original entry forming the basis of entries in any ledger. 2. General and auxiliary ledgers or other comparable records reflecting asset, liability, reserve, capital, income and expense accounts. 3. A memorandum of each order given by the investment advisor for the purchase or sale of any security, of any instruction received by the investment advisor concerning the purchase, sale, receipt or delivery of a particular security, and of any modification or cancellation of any such order or instruction. Such memoranda shall show the terms and conditions of the order, instruction, modification or CFR table of popular names state regulations. Cancellation shall identify the person connected with the investment advisor who recommended the transaction to the client and the person who placed such order, and shall show the account for which entered, the date of entry, and the bank, broker or dealer by or through whom executed where appropriate. Orders entered pursuant to the exercise of discretionary power shall be so designated. 4. All check books, bank statements, canceled checks and cash reconciliations of the investment advisor. 5. All bills or statements or copies thereof paid or unpaid, relating to the business of the investment advisor as such. 6. All trial balances, financial statements, and internal audit working papers relating to the business of such investment advisor. 7. Originals of all written communications received and copies of all written communications sent by such investment advisor relating to any recommendation made or proposed to be made and any advice given or proposed to be given. Any receipt, disbursement or delivery of funds or securities, the placing or execution of any order to purchase or sell any security, and, for any transaction that is subject to the requirements of Section 240.15c6-2 of this chapter, each confirmation received, and any allocation in each affirmation sent or received, with a date and time stamp for each allocation and affirmation that indicates when the allocation and affirmation was sent or received. IV. Predecessor performance as defined in Section 275.2064(1)(e)(12) of this chapter, and the performance or rate of return of any or all managed accounts, portfolios as defined in Section 275.2064(1)(e)(11) of this chapter or securities recommendations, provided, however, that the investment advisor shall not be required to keep any unsolicited market letters and other similar communications of general public distribution not prepared by or for the investment advisor, and b. That if the investment advisor sends any notice, circular, or other advertisement as defined in Section 275.2064(1)(e)(1) of this chapter offering any report, analysis, publication or other investment advisory service to more than 10 persons, the investment advisor shall not be required to keep a record of the names and addresses of the persons to whom it was sent, except that if such notice, circular, or advertisement is distributed to persons named on any list, the investment advisor shall retain with the copy of such notice, circular, or advertisement a memorandum describing the list and the source thereof. 8. A list or other record of all accounts in which the investment advisor is vested with any discretionary power with respect to the funds, securities or transactions of any client. 9. All powers of attorney and other evidences of the granting of any discretionary authority by any client to the investment advisor, or copies thereof. 10. All written agreements or copies thereof entered into by the investment advisor with any client or otherwise relating to the business of such investment advisor as such. 11. A copy of each. A. Advertisement as defined in Section 275.2064, 1E1, of this chapter, that the investment advisor disseminates, directly or indirectly, except 1. For oral advertisements, the advisor may instead retain a copy of any written or recorded materials used by the advisor in connection with the oral advertisement, and 2. For compensated oral testimonials and endorsements as defined in Section 275.2064, 1E17, and 5 of this chapter, the advisor may instead make and keep a record of the disclosures provided to clients or investors pursuant to Section 275.2064, 1B1 of this chapter, and B. Notice, circular, newspaper article, investment letter, bulletin, or other communication that the investment advisor disseminates, directly or indirectly, to 10 or more persons other than persons associated with such investment advisor, and C. If such notice, circular, advertisement, newspaper article, investment letter, bulletin, or other communication recommends the purchase or sale of a specific security and does not state the reasons for such recommendation, a memorandum of the investment advisor indicating the reasons therefor, and E. A copy of any questionnaire or survey used in the preparation of a third-party rating included or appearing in any advertisement in the event the advisor obtains a copy of the questionnaire or survey. 12. A copy of the investment advisor's Code of Ethics adopted and implemented pursuant to Section 275.204A1 that is in effect, or at any time within the past 5 years was in effect. E. A record of any violation of the Code of Ethics, and of any action taken as a result of the violation, and E. A record of all written acknowledgments as required by Section 275.204A-1, a 5 for each person who was currently, or within the past 5 years was, a supervised person of the investment advisor. 13. A record of each report made by an access person as required by Section 275.204A1b, including any information provided under paragraph B3e of that section in lieu of such reports. E. A record of the names of persons who are currently, or within the past 5 years were, access persons of the investment advisor, and E. A record of any decision, and the reasons supporting the decision, to approve the acquisition of securities by access persons under Section 275.204A-1c for at least 5 years after the end of the fiscal year in which the approval is granted. 14. A copy of each brochure, brochure supplement and Form CRS, and each amendment or revision to the brochure, brochure supplement and Form CRS, that satisfies the requirements of Part 2 or Part 3 of Form ADV, as applicable, 17 CFR 279.1, any summary of material changes that satisfies the requirements of Part 2 of Form ADV but is not contained in the brochure, and a record of the dates that each brochure, brochure supplement and Form CRS, each amendment or revision thereto, and each summary of material changes not contained in a brochure given to any client or to any prospective client who subsequently becomes a client. E. Documentation describing the method used to compute managed assets for purposes of Item 4. E of Part 2A of Form ADV, if the method differs from the method used to compute regulatory assets under management in Item 5. F of Part 1A of Form ADV. E. A memorandum describing any legal or disciplinary event listed in Item 9 of Part 2A or Item 3 of Part 2B, disciplinary information, and presumed to be material, if the event involved the investment advisor or any of its supervised persons and is not disclosed in the brochure or brochure supplement described in paragraph 14I of this section. The memorandum must explain the investment advisor's determination that the presumption of materiality is overcome, and must discuss the factors described in Item 9 of Part 2A of Form ADV or Item 3 of Part 2B of Form ADV. 15I. If not included in the advertisement, a record of the disclosures provided to clients or investors pursuant to Section 275.2064, 1B, 1E, and E of this chapter. E. Documentation substantiating the advisor's reasonable basis for believing that a testimonial or endorsement, as defined in Section 275.2064, 1E, 17, and 5 of this chapter, complies with Section 275.2064, 1 and that the third-party rating, as defined in Section 275.2064, 1E, 18, of this chapter complies with Section 275.2064, 1C, 1 of this chapter, and E. A record of the names of all persons who are an investment advisor's partners, officers, directors, or employees, or a person that controls, is controlled by, or is under common control with the investment advisor, or is a partner, officer, director or employee of such a person pursuant to Section 275.2064, 1B, 4E of this chapter. (16) All accounts, books, internal working papers, and any other records or documents that are necessary to form the basis for or demonstrate the calculation of any performance or rate of return of any or all managed accounts, portfolios as defined in Section 275.2064, 1E, 11 of this chapter, or securities recommendations presented in any notice, circular, advertisement as defined in Section 275.2064, 1E, 1 of this chapter, newspaper article, investment letter, bulletin, or other communication that the investment advisor disseminates, directly or indirectly, to any person other than persons associated with such investment advisor, including copies of all information provided or offered pursuant to Section 275.2064, 1D, 6 of this chapter, provided, however, that, with respect to the performance of managed accounts, the retention of all account statements, if they reflect all debits, credits, and other transactions in a client's or investor's account for the period of the statement, and all worksheets necessary to demonstrate the calculation of the performance or rate of return of all managed accounts shall be deemed to satisfy the requirements of this paragraph. 17I. A copy of the investment advisor's policies and procedures formulated pursuant to Section 275.2064, 7, of this chapter that are in effect, or at any time within the past 5 years were in effect. E. Any records documenting the investment advisor's annual review of those policies and procedures conducted pursuant to Section 275.2064, 7b of this chapter. E. A copy of any internal control report obtained or received pursuant to Section 275.2064, 2, 6e.